Story of a Gray Squirrel by Ernest Thompson Seton. Foreword. These are the ideas I have aimed to set forth in this tale. First, that although an animal is much helped by its mother's teaching, it owes still much more to the racial teaching, which is instinct, and can make a success of life without its mother's guidance, if only it can live through the dangerous time of infancy and early life. Second, animals often are tempted into immorality, by which I mean any habit or practice that would in its final working tend to destroy the race. Nature has rigorous ways of dealing with such. Third, animals, like ourselves, must maintain ceaseless war against insect parasites or perish. Fourth, in the nut forests of America, practically every tree was planted by the gray squirrel or its kin. No squirrels, no nut trees. These are the motive thoughts behind my woodland novel. I hope I have presented them convincingly. If not, I hope at least you have been entertained by the romance. Ernest Thompson Seton. End of foreword. Chapter 1 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 1, The Foundling. It was a rugged old tree, standing sturdy and big among the slender second growth. The woodman had spared it because it was too gnarled and too difficult for them to handle. But the woodpecker, and a host of woodfolk that looked to the woodpecker for lodgings, had marked and used it for many years. Its every cranny and borehole was inhabited by some quaint elfin of the woods. The biggest hollow of all, just below the first limb, had done duty for two families of the flickers who first made it, and now was the homing hole of a mother gray squirrel. She appeared to have no mate, at least none was seen. No doubt the outlaw gunners could have told a tale, had they cared to admit that they went gunning in springtime, and now the widow was doing the best she could by her family in the big gnarled tree. All went well for a while, then one day, in haste maybe, she broke an old rule in squirreldom. She climbed her nesting tree openly, instead of going up its neighbor and then crossing to the den by way of the overhead branches. The farm boy who saw it gave a little yelp of savage triumph. His caveman nature broke out. Clubs and stones were lying near. The whirling end of a stick picked off the mother squirrel as she tried to escape with a little one in her mouth. Had he killed two dangerous enemies, the boy could not have yelled louder. Then up the tree he climbed and found in the nest two living young ones. With these in his pocket he descended. When on the ground, he found that one was dead, crushed in climbing down. Thus only one little squirrel was left alive, only one of the family that he had seen. The harmless mother and two helpless, harmless little ones dead in his hands. Why? What good did it do him to destroy all this beautiful wildlife? He did not know. He did not think of it at all. He had yielded only to the wild ancestral instinct to kill, when came a chance to kill. For we must remember that when that instinct was implanted, wild animals were either terrible enemies or food that must be got at any price. The excitement over, the boy looked at the helpless squirming thing in his hand, and a surge of remorse came on him. He could not feed it. It must die of hunger. He wished that he knew of some other nest into which he might put it. He drifted back to the barn. The mew of a young kitten caught his ear. He went to the manger. Here was the old cat with the one kitten that had been left her of her brood born 2 days back. Remembrance of many field mice, chipmunks, and some squirrels killed by that old green-eyed huntress struck a painful note. Yes, no matter what he did, that old cat would surely get, kill, and eat the orphan squirrel. Then he yielded to a sudden impulse and said, "Here it is. Eat it now." He dropped the little stranger into the nest beside the kitten. The cat turned toward it, smelled it suspiciously once or twice, then licked its back, picked it up in her mouth, and tucked it under her arm, where half an hour later the boy found it taking dinner alongside its new-found foster brother, while the motherly old cat leaned back with chin in air, half-closed eyes, and purring the happy, contented purr of mother pride. Now indeed the future of the foundling was assured. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 2, His Kittenhood. Little Graycoat developed much faster than his kitten foster brother. The spirit of play was rampant in him. He would scramble up his mother's leg a score of times a day, clinging on with teeth, arms, and claws, then mount her back and frisk along to climb her upright tail. And when his weight was too much, down the tail would droop, and he would go merrily sliding off the tip to rush to her legs and climb the toboggan off again. The kitten never learned the trick, but it seemed to amuse the cat almost as much as it did the squirrelet, and she showed an amazing partiality for the lively, long-tailed foundling. So did others of importance, men and women folk of the farmhouse, and neighbors too. The frisky Graycoat grew up amid experiences foreign to his tastes, and of a kind unknown to his race. The kitten too grew up, and in midsummer was carried off to a distant farmhouse to be their cat. Now the squirrel was over half-grown, and his tail was broadening out into a great banner of buff with silver tips. His life was with the old cat. His food was partly from her dish. But many things there were to eat that delighted him, and that pleased her not. There was corn in the barn, and chicken feed in the yard, and fruit in the garden. Well fed and protected, he grew big and handsome, bigger and handsomer than his wild brothers, so the housefolk said. But of that he knew nothing. He had never seen his own people. The memory of his mother had faded out. So far as he knew, he was only a bushy-tailed cat. But inside was an inheritance of instincts, as well as of blood and bone, that would surely take control and send him herding, if they happened near, with those and those alone of the blousy Silvertails. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel, by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 3, The Red Horror. In the hunting moon it came, just when the corn begins to turn, and in the dawn when Bannertail Graycoat was yielding to the thrill that comes with action, youth, and life in due time. There was a growing murmuring sound, then smoke from the barn, like that he had seen coming from the red mystery in the cookhouse. But this grew very fast and huge. Men came running, horses frantically plunging hurried out, and other living things and doings that he did not understand. Then when the sun was high, a blackened, smoking pile there was where once had stood the dear old barn, and a new strange feeling over all. The old cat disappeared. A few days more, and the housefolk too were gone. The place was deserted, himself a wildwood roving squirrel, quite alone, without a trace of squirrel training, such as examples of the old ones gives, unequipped, unaccompanied, unprepared for the life fight, except that he had a perfect body, and in his soul enthroned the many deep and dominating instincts of his race. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 4, The New and Lonely Life. The break was made complete by the Red Horror and the going of the man-people. Fences and buildings are good for some things, but the tall timber of the distant wooded hill was calling to him, and though he came back many a time to the garden while there yet was fruit, and to the field while the corn was standing, he was ever more in the timber and less in the open. Food there was in abundance now, for it was early autumn, and who was to be his guide in this? what to eat, what to let alone. These 2 guides he had, and they proved enough. Instinct, the wisdom inherited from his forebears, and his keen, discriminating nose. Scrambling up a rotten stub one day, a flake of bark fell off, and here a row were 3 white grubs, fat, rounded, juicy. It was instinct bade him seize them, and it was smell that justified the order. Then which, it is hard to say, told him to reject the strong brown nippers at one end of each prize. That day he learned to pry off flakes of bark for the rich foodstuffs lodged behind. At another time, when he worked off a slab of bark in hopes of a meal, he found only a long brown millipede. Its smell was earthy but strange, its many legs and its warning feelers uncanny. The smell guide seemed in doubt, but the inboard warden said, "Beware, touch it not." He hung back, watching askance as the evil thing, distilling its strange pestilent gas, wormed snake-like out of sight. And Bannertail in a moment had formed a habit that was of his race, and that lasted all his life. Yea, longer, for he passed it on, this: let the 100-leggers alone. Are they not of a fearsome poison race? Thus he grew daily in the ways of wood lore. He learned that the gumdrops on the wounded bark of the black birch are good to eat, and the little faded brown umbrella in the woods is a sign that it has a white cucumber in its underground cellar, that the wild bees' nests have honey in them, and grubs as good as honey. But beware, for the bee has a sting. He learned that the little rag bundle babies hanging from vine and twig contain some sort of mushy shell-covered creature that is amazingly good to eat. That the little green apples that grow on the oaks are not acorns, and are yet toothsome morsels of the lighter sort. While nearly every bush in the woods at autumn now had strings of berries whose pulp was good to eat, and whose single inside seed was as sweet as any nut. Thus he was learning woodcraft, and grew and prospered, for outside of sundry red squirrels and chipmunks, there were few competitors for this generous giving of the woods. End of Chapter 4.
You're listening to Classic Audiobook Collection. Give us 5 stars and share with a friend who likes free audiobooks as much as we do. Now back to the show.
Chapter 5 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 5. The Fluffing of His Tail. There are certain stages of growth that are marked by changes which, if not sudden, are for a time very quick, and the big change in Bannertail, which took place just as he gave up the tricks and habits learned from his cat folk, and began to be truly a squirrel, was marked by the fluffing of his tail. Always long and long-haired, it was a poor wisp of a thing until the coming of the hunting moon. Then the hairs grew out longer and became plumy. Then the tail muscles swelled and worked with power. Then, too, he began a habit of fluffing out that full and flaunting plume every few minutes. Once or twice a day he combed it, and ever he was most careful to keep it out of wet or dirt. His coat might be stained with juice of fruit or gum of pine, and little he cared. But the moment a pine drop or a bit of stick, moss, or mud clung to his tail, he stopped all other work to lick, clean, comb, shake, fluff, and double fluff that precious beautiful member to its perfect fullness, lightness, and plumy breadth. Why? What the trunk is to the elephant and the paw to the monkey, the tail is to the gray squirrel. It is his special gift, a vital part of his outfit, the secret of his life. The possum's tail is to swing by, the fox's tail for a blanket wrap. But the squirrel's tail is a parachute, a land easy. With that in perfect trim, he can fall from any height in any tree, and be sure of this, that he will land with ease and lightness, and on his feet. This thing Bannertail knew without learning it. It was implanted, not by what he saw in kitten days, or in the woods about, but by the great All-Mother, who had builded up his athlete form and blessed him with an inner guide. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel, by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 6. The First Nut Crop. That year, the nut crop was a failure. This was the off year for the red oaks. They bear only every other season. The white oaks had been nipped by a late frost. The beech trees were very scarce, and the chestnuts were gone. The blight had taken them all. Pignut hickories were not plentiful, and the very best of all, the sweet shag hickory, had suffered like the white oaks. October, the time of the nut harvest, came. Dry leaves were drifting to the ground, and occasional thumps told of big fat nuts that also were falling, sometimes of themselves, and sometimes cut by harvesters. For although no other gray squirrel was to be seen, Bannertail was not alone. A pair of red squirrels was there, and half a dozen chipmunks searching about for the scattering precious nuts. Their methods were very different from those of the gray squirrel race. The chipmunks were carrying off the prizes in their cheek pouches to underground storehouses. The red squirrels were hurrying away with their loads to distant hollow trees, a day's gathering in one tree. The gray squirrel's way is different. With them, each nut is buried in the ground, 3 or 4 inches deep, one nut at each place. A very precise, essential instinct it is that regulates this plan. It is inwrought with the very making of the gray squirrel race. Yet in Bannertail it was scarcely functioning at all. Even the strongest inherited habit needs a starter. How does a young chicken learn to peck? It has the strong inborn readiness to do it, but we know that impulse must be stimulated at first by seeing the mother peck, or it will not function. In an incubator, it is necessary to have a sophisticated chicken as a leader, or the chickens of the machine foster mother will die, not knowing how to feed. Nevertheless, the instinct is so strong that a trifle will arouse it to take control. Yes, so small a trifle as tapping on the incubator floor with a pencil point will tear the flimsy veil, break the restraining bond, and set the life-preserving instinct free. Like this chicken, robbed of its birthright by interfering man, was Bannertail in his blind yielding to a vague desire to hide the nuts. He had never seen it done. The example of the other nut gatherers was not helpful, was bewildering indeed. Confused between the inborn impulse and the outside stimulus of example, Bannertail would seize a nut, strip off the husk, and hide it quickly anywhere. Some nuts he would thrust under bits of brush or tufts of grass. Some he buried by dropping leaves and rubbish over them. And a few, toward the end, he hid by digging a shallow hole. But the real, well-directed, energetic instinct to hide nut after nut, burying them 3 good inches, an arm's length underground, was far from being aroused, was even hindered by seeing the red squirrels and the chipmunks about him burying away their stores without attempting to bury them at all. So the poor, skimpy harvest was gathered. What was not carried off was hidden by the trees themselves under a layer of dead and fallen leaves. High above, in an old red oak, Bannertail found a place where a broken limb had let the weather in, so the tree was rotted. Digging out the soft wood left an ample cave, which he gnawed and garnished into a warm and weatherproof home. The bright, sharp days of autumn passed. The leaves were on the ground throughout the woods in noisy dryness and lavish superabundance. The summer birds had gone, and the chipmunk, oversensitive to the crispness of the mornings, had bowed sedately on November 1st, had said his last goodbye, and had gone to sleep. Thus one more voice was hushed. The feeling of the woods was, hush, be still, of some new event, that the tentacles of high-strung woodfolk sensed and appraised as sinister. Backward they shrank, to hide away and wait. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 7 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 7, The Sun Song of Bannertail. The sun was rising in a rosy mist and glinting the dew-wet overlimbs as there rang across the bright, bare stretch of woodland a loud quack, 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 quack. Like a high priest of the sun on the topmost peak of the temple stood Bannertail, carried away by a newborn inner urge. A full-grown wildwood gray squirrel he was now. The call of the woods had claimed him, and he hailed the glory of the east with an ever longer quah, quah, quah. This was the season of the shortest days, though no snow had come as yet to cover the brown-leaved earth. Few birds were left of the summer merrymakers. The crow, the nuthatch, the chickadee, and the wood whale alone were there, and the sharp tang of the frostbit air was holding back their sun-up calls. But Bannertail, a big gray squirrel now, found gladness in the light, intensified, it seemed, by the very lateness of its coming. Quack, 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 he sang, and done into speech of man, the song said, hip, 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 hurrah! He had risen from his bed in the hollow oak to meet and greet it. He was full of lusty life now, and daily better loved his life. Quack, 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 quack! He poured it out again and again. The chickadee quit his bug hunt for a moment to throw back his head and shout, me too! The nuthatch, wrong end up, answered in a low, nasal tone, here, here, here. Even the sulky crow joined in at last with a rah, 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 and the wood whale beat a long tattoo. Hip, 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 hurrah, 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 shouted Bannertail, as the all-blessed glory rose clear above the eastern trees, and the world was aflood with the sun-god's golden smile. A score of times he had thus sung and whiplashed his tail, and sung again exulting, when far away among the noises made by birds was a low quah, quah, the voice of another gray squirrel. His kind was all too scarce in Jersey land, and yet another would not necessarily be a friend. But in the delicate, meaningful modulations of sound so accurately sensed by the squirrel's keen ear, this far-off quah, quah was a little softer than his own, a little higher pitched, a little more gently modulated, and Bannertail knew without a moment's guessing. Yes, it was a gray squirrel, and it was not one that would take the warpath against him. The distant voice replied no more, and Bannertail set about foraging for his morning meal. The oak tree in which he had slept was only one of the half-a-dozen beds he now claimed. It was a red oak, therefore its acorns were of poor quality, and it was on the edge of the woods. The best feeding grounds were some distance away, but the road to them well known. Although so much at home in the trees, Bannertail traveled on the ground when going to a distance. Down the great trunk, across an open space to a stump, a pause on the stump to fluff his tail and look around. A few bounds to a fence, then along the top of that in 3-foot hops, till he came to the gap. 6 feet across this gap, and he took the flying leap with pride, remembering how, not so long ago, he used perforce to drop to the ground and amble to the other post. He was making for the white oak and hickory groves, but his keen nose brought him the message of a big red acorn under the leaves. He scratched it out and smelled it. Yes, good. He ripped off the shell, and here, ensconced in the middle, was a fat white grub, just as good as the nut itself, or better. So Bannertail had grub on the half-shell and nuts on the side for his first course. Then he set about nosing for hidden hickory nuts. Few and scarce were they. He had not found one when a growing racket announced the curse beast of the woods, a self-hunting dog. Clatter, crash among the dry leaves and brush it came, yelping with noisy, senseless stupidity when it found a track that seemed faintly fresh. Bannertail went quietly up a near elm tree, keeping the trunk between himself and the beast. From the elm he swung to the basswood, and finished his meal of basswood buds. Keeping one eye on the beast, he scrambled to an open platform nest that he had made a month ago, where he lazed in the sun, still keeping eyes and ears alert for tidings from the disturber below. The huge brute prowled around and found the fresh scent up the elm, and barked at it too, but of course he was barking up the wrong tree, and presently went off. Bannertail watched him with some faint amusement, then at last went rippling down the trunk and through the woods like a cork going down a rushing stream. He was traveling home by the familiar route on the ground, in undulated bounds, with pauses at each high lookout, when again the alarm of enemies reached him. A dog sniffing and barking, and farther off a hunter. Bannertail made for the nearest big tree, and up that he went, keeping ever the trunk between. Then came the dog, a squirrel hound, and found the track and yelped. Up near the top was a dray, or platform nest, one Bannertail had used and partly built, and in this he stretched out contentedly, peering over the edge at the ugly brutes below. The dog kept yelping up the trunk, saying plainly, "Squirrel, squirrel, squirrel, up, up, up." And the hunter came and craned his neck till it was cricked, but nothing he saw to shoot at. Then he did what a hunter often does. He sent a charge of shot through the nest that was in plain view. There were some heavy twigs in its makeup, and it rested on a massive fork, or the event might have gone hard with Bannertail. The timber received most of the shock of the shot, but a something went stinging through his ear tip that stuck beyond the rim. It hurt and scared him, and he was divided between the impulse to rush forth and seek other shelter, and the instinct to lie absolutely still. Fortunately, he lay still, and the hunter passed on, leaving the squirrel wiser in several ways. For now he knew the danger of the dray when gunners came, and the wisdom of lay low when in doubt. End of chapter 7. Chapter 8 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 8, The Cold Sleep. Next day there was a driving storm of snow, and whether the sun came up or not, Bannertail did not know. He kept his nest, and, falling back on an ancient spend time of the folk he kins with, he curled up into a sleep that deepened with the cold. This is partly a deliberate sleep. The animal voluntarily lets go, knowing that life outside is unattractive. He, by an act of the will, induces the cold sleep. That is like a chapter of forgetfulness, with neither hunger nor desire, and after it is over, no pain and punishment or remorse. For 2 days the storm raged, and when the white flakes ceased to pile upon the hills and trees, a cutting blast arose that sent snow horses riding across the fields, and piled them up in drifts along the fences. It made life harder for the squirrel folk by hiding good Mother Earth from their hungry eyes. But in one way the wind served them, for it swept the snow. It was very cold. On the 4th day, Bannertail peeped forth on the changed white world. The wind, the pest of wild life in the trees, had ceased. The sky was clear, and the sun was shining in a weak, uncertain way. It evoked no enthusiasm in the graycoat's soul. Not once did he utter his sun salute. He was stiff and sleepy, and a little hungry as he went forth. His hunger grew with the exercise of moving. Had he been capable of such thought, he might have said, "Thank goodness the wind has swept the snow from the branches." He galloped and bounded from one high overway to another, till a wide gap between treetops compelled him to descend. Over the broad forest floor of shining white he leaped, and made for the beloved hickory grove. Pine cones furnish food. So do buds of elm and flower buds of maple. Red acorns are bitter, yet eatable. White acorns still better. And chestnuts and beechnuts delicious. But the crowning glory of a chosen feast is nuts of the big shag hickory, so hard of shell that only the strongest chisel teeth can reach them, so precious that nature locks them up in a strong box of stone, enwrapped in a sole leather case, so sought after that none of them escape the hungry creatures of the wood for winter use, except such as they themselves have hidden for just such times. Bannertail quartered the surface of the snow among the silent bare-limbed trees, sniffing, alert for the faintest whiff. A hound would not have found it. His nose is trained for other game. Bannertail stopped, swung his keen divining rod, advanced a few hops, moved this way and that, then at the point of the most alluring whiff, he began to dig down through the snow. Soon he was out of sight, for here the drift was nearly 2 feet deep. But he kept on, then his busy hind feet replacing the front ones as diggers for a time, sent flying out on the white surface brown leaves, then black loam. Nothing showed but his tail and little jets of leaf mold. His whole arm's length into the frosty ground did he dig, allured by an ever-growing, rich aroma. At last he seized and dragged forth in his teeth a big, fat hickory nut, one buried by himself last fall, and, bounding with rippling tail up a tree to a safe perch that was man-high from the ground, he sawed the shell adroitly and feasted on the choicest food that is known to the squirrel kind. A second prowl and treasure hunt produced another nut. A third produced an acorn. A visit to the familiar ever-unfrozen spring quenched his thirst, and then back he undulated through the woods and over the snow to his cozy castle in the oak. End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 9, The Balking of Fire Eyes. Other days were much like this as the snow moon slowly passed, but one there was that claimed a place in his memory for long. He had gone farther afield to another grove of hickories and was digging down so deep into the snow that caution compelled him to come out and look around at intervals. It was well he did so, for a flash of brown and white appeared on a near log. It made toward him, and Bannertail got an instinctive sense of fear. Small though it was, smaller than himself, the diabolic fire in its close-set eyes gave him a thrill of terror. He felt that his only safety lay in flight. Now it was a race for the tall timber, and a close one, but Bannertail's hops were 6 feet long. His legs went faster than the eye could see. The deep snow was harder on him than on his ferocious enemy, but he reached the great rugged trunk of an oak, and up that, gaining a little. The weasel followed close behind, up to the topmost limbs, and out on a long level branch, to leap for the next tree. Bannertail could leap farther than Fire Eyes, but then he was heavier and had to leap from where the twigs were thicker. So Fire Eyes, having only half as far to go, covered the leap as well as the squirrel did, and away they went as before. Every wise squirrel knows all the leaps in his woods, those which he can easily make, and those which will call for every ounce of power in his legs. The devilish pertinacity of the weasel, still hard after him, compelled him to adopt a scheme. He made for a wide leap, the very limit of his powers, where the takeoff was the end of a big broken branch, and racing 6 hops behind was the brown terror. Without a moment's pause went Bannertail easily across the 6-foot gap to land on a sturdy limb in the other tree. And the weasel! He knew he could not make it, hung back an instant, gathered his legs under him, snarled, glared redder-eyed than ever, bobbed down a couple times, measured the distance with his eye, then wheeled and, racing back, went down the tree to cross and climb the one that sheltered the squirrel. Bannertail quietly hopped to a higher perch, and when the right time came, leaped back again to the stout oak bough. Again, the weasel, with dogged pertinacity, raced down and up, only to see the gray squirrel again leap lightly across the impassable gulf. Most hunters would have given up now, but there is no end to the dogged stick-to-itiveness of the weasel. Besides, he was hungry, and 6 times he had made the long circuit while his intended victim took the short leap. Then Bannertail, gaining confidence, hit on a plan which, while it may have been meant for mere teasing, had all the effect of a deep stratagem played with absolute success. When next the little red-eyed terror came racing along the oak limb, Bannertail waited till the very last moment, then leaped, grasped the far side perch, and turning, yipped out one derisive griff, griff, griff after another, and craned forward in mockery of the little fury. This was too much. Wild with rage, the weasel took the leap, fell far short, and went whirling head over heels down 75 feet, to land not in the soft snow, but on a hard oak log that knocked out his cruel wind, and ended for the day all further wish to murder or destroy. End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 10, Red Squirrel, The Scold of the Woods. The snow moon was waning, the hunger moon at hand, when Bannertail met with another adventure. He had gone far off to the pine woods of a deep glen, searching for cones, when he was set on by a red squirrel. Flouncing over the plumy boughs it came, chattering, "Squat, squat, quit, 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 get," and each moment seemed more inclined to make a tooth-and-nail attack on Bannertail. And he? What had he to fear? Was he not bigger and stronger than the red-headed one? Yes, very well able to overmatch him in fight, but his position was much like that of a grown man who is assailed by a blackguard boy. There is no glory in the fight if it comes to that. There is much unpleasant publicity, and the man usually decides that it is better to ignore the insult and retreat. This was Bannertail's position exactly. He hated a row. Most wild things do. It brings them into notice of the very creatures they wish to avoid. Besides, the red squirrel was not without some justification, for these were his pine trees by right of long possession. Bannertail, without touch of violence or fear of it, yielded to the inward impulses, yielded and retreated, closely pursued by the red squirrel, who kept just out of reach, but worked himself up into a still noisier rage as he saw the invader draw off. It was characteristic of the red one that he did not stop at the border of his own range, but followed right into the hickory country, shrieking, Get, ye brute ye, get!" with insolence born of his success, though its real explanation was beyond him. End of Chapter 10. Chapter 11 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 11, Bannertail and the Echo Voice. The hunger moon, our February, was half worn away when again the sky gods seemed to win against the powers of chill and gloom. Food was ever scarcer, but Bannertail had enough, and was filled with the vigor of young life. The sun came up in a cloudless sky that day and blazed through the branches of still, tense woodland. The air was crisp and exhilarating, and Bannertail, tingling with the elation of life, leaped up for the lust of leaping and sang out his loudest song. Quah, 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 quah! From a high perch. Ringing across the woodland it went, and the wood whales drummed on hardwood drums in keen from a high perch. Ringing across the woodland it went, and the wood whales drummed on hardwood drums in keen responsiveness to the same fair, vernal influence of the time. Though he seemed only to sing for singing's sake, he was conscious lately of a growing loneliness, a hankering for company that had never possessed him all winter. Indeed, he had resented it when any hint of visitors had reached him, but now he was restless and desireful, as well as bursting with the wish to sing. Quah, 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 he sang again and again, and on the still, bright air were echoes from the hills. Quah, quah, quah! He poured it out again, and the echo came, quah, quah! Then another call, and the echo, quah! Was it an echo? He waited in silence. Then far away he heard the soft, quah, quah, that had caught his ear last fall. The voice of another gray coat, but so soft and alluring that it thrilled him. Here, indeed, was the answer to the hankering in his heart. But even as he craned and strained to locate its very place, another call was heard. Quah, 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 quah! From some big, strong gray coat like himself, and all the fighting blood in him was stirred. He raced to the ground and across the woodland to the hillside whence the voice came. On a log he stopped, with senses alert for new guidance. Quah, 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 came the soft call, and up the tree went Bannertail. A silvery tail tip flashed behind the trunk, and now, ablaze with watchfulness, he followed fast. Then came a lone, long quah, quah, then a defiant grr. Like a scream, and a third big gray squirrel appeared to scramble up after Bannertail. End of chapter 11. Chapter 12 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 12, The Courting of Silvergray. Away went Silvergray, undulating among the high branches that led to the next tree, and keen behind came the two. Then they met at the branch that had furnished the footway for the gray lady, and in a moment they clinched. Grappling like cats, they drove their teeth into each other's shoulders, just where the hide was thickest and the danger least. In their combat rage, they paid no heed to where they were. Their every clutch was on each other, none for the branch, and over they tumbled into open space. Two fighting cats so falling would have clutched the harder, and hoped each that the other would be the one to land on the underside. Squirrels have a different way. Sensing the fall, at once they sprang apart. Each fluffed his great flowing tail to the utmost. It's nature's own land easy. They landed gently, wide apart, and quite unshaken even by the fall. Overhead was the lady of the tourney, in plain view, and the two stout knights lost not a moment in darting up her tree. Again they met on a narrow limb. Again they clutched and stabbed each other with their chisel teeth. Again the reckless grapple, clutch, and the drop in vacant air. Again they shot apart. One landed on the solid ground, but the other, the echo voice, went splash, plunge into the deepest part of the creek. In 10 heartbeats he was safely on the bank. But there is such soothing magic in cold water, such quenching of all fires, be they of smoke or love or war, that the echo singer crawled forth in quite a different mood, and Bannertail, flashing up the great tree trunk, went now alone. To have conquered a rival is a long step toward victory, but it is not yet victory complete. When he swung from limb to limb, ever nearer the silver gray, he was stirred with the wildest hankering of love. Was she not altogether lovely? But she fled away as though she feared him, and away he went pursuing. There is no more exquisite climbing action than that of the squirrel, and these two, half a leap apart, winding, wending, rippling through the high roof tree of the woods, were less like two gray climbing things than some long silvery serpent, sinuating, flashing in and out in undulating coils with endless grace and certainty among the trees. Now who will say that Silver Gray really raced her fastest, and who will deny that he did his best? He was strong and swift, the race must end, and then she faced him with anger and menace simulated in her face and pose. He approached too near, her chisel teeth closed on his neck. He held still, limp, absolutely unresisting. Her clutch relaxed. Had he not surrendered? They stood facing each other, an armed neutrality established, nothing more. Shyly apart and yet together, they drifted about that day, feeding at feed time. But she was ready to warn him that his distance he must keep. By countless little signs they understood each other, and when the night came she entered a familiar hollow tree and warned him to go home. Next day they met again, and the next, for there is a rule of woodland courtship. 3 times he must offer and be refused. Having passed this proof, all may be well. Thus the tradition of the woods was fully carried out, and Bannertail with Silvergray was looking for a home. End of Chapter 12. Chapter 13 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 13, The Home in the High Hickory. Bannertail was very well satisfied with the home in the red oak, and assumed that thither he should bring his bride. But he had not reckoned with certain big facts, that is, laws, for the reason that he had never before met them. The female wild thing claims all authority in matters of the home, and in the honeymoon time, no wild mate would even challenge her right to rule. So the red oak den was then and there abandoned. Search in the hickory grove resulted in a find. A flicker had dug into the tree of a tall hickory where it was dead. Once through the outer shell, the inner wood was rotten punk, too easy for a flicker to work in, but exactly right and easy for a gray squirrel. Here, then, the two set to work digging out the soft rotten wood till the chamber was to their liking, much bigger than that the woodpecker would have made. March, the wakening moon, was spent in making the home and lining the nest. Bark strips, pine needles, fine shreds of plants that had defied the wind and snow, rags of clothes left by winter woodmen, feathers, tufts of wool, and many twigs of basswood with their swollen buds, and slippery elm, and 1 or 2, yes, Silvergray could not resist the impulse, fat acorns found from last year's crop, and hidden now deep in the lining of the nest. There can be no happier time for any wild and lusty live thing than when working with a loving mate at the building and making of the nest. Their world is one of joy, fine weather, fair hunting with food enough, overwhelming instincts at their flush of compulsion, all gratified in sanest, fullest measure. This sure is joy, and Bannertail met each yellow sun-up with his loudest song of praise, as he watched it from the highest lookout of his home tree. His "Quah!" song reached afar, and in its vibrant note expressed the happy time, and expressing it, intensified it in himself. There seemed no ill to mar the time. even the passing snowstorms of the month seemed trifles. They were little more than landmarks on the joyful way. End of chapter 13. Chapter 14 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 14, New Rivals. The stormy moon of March was nearly over when a change came on their happy comradeship. Silvergray seemed to beget a coolness, a singular aloofness. If they were on the same branch together, she did not sit touching him. If he moved to where she chanced to stand, and tried as 1,000 times before to snuggle up, she moved away. The cloud, whatever it was, grew bigger. In vain he sought by pleasing acts to win her back. She had definitely turned against him, and the climax came when one evening they climbed to their finished, set, and furnished house. She whisked in ahead of him, and then turning suddenly, filled the doorway with her countenance, expressing defiance and hostility, her sharp teeth menacingly displayed. She said as plainly as she could, "You keep away. You are not wanted here." And Bannertail, what could he do? Hurt, rebuffed, not wanted in the house he had made and loved, turned away perforce and glumly sought his bachelor home in the friendly old red oak. Whatever was the cause, Bannertail knew that it was his part to keep away, at least to respond to her wishes. Next morning, after feeding, he swung to the nesting tree. Yes, there she was on a limb, but at once she retreated to the door and repeated the signal, "You are not wanted here." The next day it was the same. Then on the third day she was nowhere to be seen. Bannertail hung about hoping for a glimpse, but none he got. Cautiously, fearfully, he climbed the old familiar barkway. Silently arriving at the door, he gently thrust in his head. The sweet, familiar furry smell told him, yes, she was there. He moved inward another step. Yes, there she lay curled up and breathing. One step more, up she started with an angry little snort. Bannertail sprang back and away, but not before he had seen and sensed this solving of the mystery. There, snuggling together under her warm body, were 3 tiny little baby squirrels. For this, indeed, it was that Mother Nature whispered messages and rules of conduct. For this time, it was she had dowered this untutored little mother squirrel with all the garnered wisdom of the folk before. Nor did she leave them now, but sent the very message to Mother Squirrel and Father Squirrel, and the little ones too, at the very time when their own poor knowledge must have failed. It was the unspoken hint from her that made the little mother soon-to-be hide in the nesting place some nuts with buds of slippery elm, twigs of spicebush, and the bitter but nourishing red acorns. In them was food and tonic for the trying time. Water she could get nearby, but even that called for no journey forth. It chanced that a driving rain drenched the tree, and at the very door she found enough to drink. End of chapter 14. Chapter 15 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 15, Bachelor Life Again. Bannertail was left to himself, like a bachelor driven to his club. He had become very wise in wood lore, so that the food question was no longer serious. Not counting the remnant of the nuts still unearthed, the swelling buds of every sweet-sapped tree were wholesome, delicious food. The inner bark of sweet birch trees was good. There were grubs and borers under flakes of bark. The puckerberries, or red chokeberries that grow in the lowlands, still hung in clusters. Their puckery sourness last fall had made all creatures let them alone, but a winter weathering had sweetened them, and now they were toothsome as well as abundant sustenance. Another wholly different food was added to the list. With the bright spring days, the yellow sapsucker arrived from the south. He is a crafty bird and a lover of sweets. His plan is to drill with his sharp beak a hole deep through the bark of a sugar maple, so the sap runs out and down the bark, lodging in the crevices. And not one, but a score of trees he taps. Of course the sun evaporates the sap, so it becomes syrup and even sugar on the edges. This attracts many spring insects, which get entangled in the sticky stuff, and the sapsucker, going from tree to tree in the morning, feasts on a rich confection of candied bugs. But many other creatures of the woods delight in this primitive sweetmeat, and Bannertail did not hesitate to take it when he could find it. Although animals have some respect for property law among their own kind, might is the only right they own in dealing with others. Amusement aplenty Bannertail found in building drays or tree nests. These are stick platforms of the simplest open work placed high in convenient trees. Some are for lookouts, some for sleeping porches when the night is hot, some are for the sun bath that every wise squirrel takes. Here he would lie on his back in the morning sun with his belly exposed, his limbs outsprawling, and let the healing sun rays strike through the thin skin, reaching every part with their actinic power. Bannertail did it because it was pleasant, and he ceased doing it when it no longer pleased him. Is not this indeed Dame Nature's way? Pain is her protest against injury, and soothingness in the healthy creature is the proof that it is doing good. Many disorders we know are met or warded off by this sun bath. We know it now. Not long ago we had no fuller information than had Bannertail on such things. We knew only that it felt good at the time and left us feeling better. So we took it as he took it, when the need of the body called for it, and ceased as he did, when the body no longer desired it. End of chapter 15. Chapter 16 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 16, The Warden Meets an Invader. The bond between them had kept Bannertail near his mate, and her warning kept him not too near. Yet it was his daily wont to come to the nesting tree and wait about, in case of anything, he knew not what. This it was that he heard a rustling in the nearby limbs one day, then caught a flash of red. A stranger approaching the tree of trees. All Bannertail's fighting blood was aroused. He leaped by well-known jumps and coursed along well-known overways till he was on the nesting tree, and undulated like a silvery shadow up the familiar trunk to find himself facing the very red squirrel whose range he once had entered, and from whom he, Bannertail, had fled. But what a change of situation and of heart! Redhead scoffed and shook his flaming tail. He shrieked his skit skit and stood prepared to fight. Did Bannertail hold back? He, Bannertail, that formerly had declined the combat with this very rogue? Not for an instant. There was new engendered power within, compelling him. He sprang on the red bandit with all his vigor and drove his teeth in deep. The redhead was a fighter, too. He clinched and bit. They clung, wrestled and stabbed, then losing hold of the tree, went hurling to the earth below. In air they flung apart, but landing unhurt, they clinched again on the ground. Then the redhead, bleeding from many little wounds, and overmatched, sought to escape, dodged this way and that, found refuge in a hole under a root. And Bannertail, breathless, with 2 or 3 slight stabs, swung slowly up the tree from which Silvergray had watched the fight of her mate. There never yet was feminine heart that withheld its meed of worship from her fighting champion coming home victorious, which reason may not have entered into it at all. But this surely counted. The young one's eyes were opened. They were no longer shapeless lumps of flesh. They were fuzzy little squirrels. The time had come for the father to rejoin the brood. With the come-together instinct that follows fight, he climbed to the very doorway. She met him there, whisker to whisker. She reached out and licked his wounded shoulder. When she re-entered the den, he came in too, nosing his brood to get their smell, just as a woman mother buries her nose in the creasy neck of her baby. He gently curled about them all, and the reunited family went sound asleep in their single double bed. End of chapter 16. Chapter 17 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel, by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 17, The Hoodoo on the Home. Not many days later, they had a new unfriendly visitor. It was in the morning rest hour that follows early breakfast. The familiar cluck cluck of a flicker had sounded from a near treetop. Then his stirring tattoo was heard on a high dead limb of the one tree. A little later, a scratching sound, and the hole above was darkened by the head and shoulders of a big bird peering down at them through the opening. His long, sharp beak was open to utter a loud, startling clap. Up leaped Bannertail to meet and fight off the invader. There was little fighting to be done, for the flicker sprang back and onto a high limb. His fighting feathers were raised, and his threatening beak did look very dangerous, but he did not wait for Bannertail to spring on him. He swooped away in a glory of yellow wings, and with a chuckle of derision. It was a small incident, but it made a second break in their sense of secrecy. Then came another little shock. The blue jay, the noisy mischief maker, was prowling around the farmhouse, and high on a ledge he found a handful of big horse chestnuts gathered by the boy to throw at cats. Had he been hungry, the jay would have eaten them, but choice food was plentiful, so now his storage instincts took charge. The blue jay nearly sprained his bill getting a hold on a nut, then carried it off, looking for a hollow tree in which to hide it, as is the custom of his kind. The hole he found was the squirrel's nest. He meant to take a good look in before dropping it, but the nut was big and heavy, smooth and round. It slipped from his beak, plump into the sleeping family, landing right on Bannertail's nose. Up he jumped with a snort and rushed to the door. The blue jay was off at a safe distance and chortled aloud, "Droll, droll, Jay Jay," in mischievous mockery, then flew away. Bannertail might have taken that nut for a friendly gift, but its coming showed that the den was over-visible. There was something wrong with it. Later the very same day, the blue jay did this same thing with another big chestnut. Evidently now he enjoyed the commotion that followed the dropping of the nut. One day later came a still more disturbing event. A roving, prowling cur found the fresh squirrel track up the tree, and yapped so persistently that two boys who were leagued with the dog for all manner of evil came, marked the hole, and spent half an hour throwing stones at it, varying their volleys with heavy pounding on the trunk to make the squirrel come out. Of course, neither Bannertail nor Silvergray did show themselves. That is very old wood wisdom. Lay low, keep out of sight when the foe is on the warpath. And at last the besiegers and their yap colleague tramped away without having seen sign or hair of a squirrel. There was very little to the incident, but it sank deep into Silvergray's small brain. This nest is ill-concealed. Every hostile creature finds it. There was yet another circumstance that urged action. Shall I tell it? It is so unpicturesque. A squirrel's nest is a breeding ground for vermin. A nest that is lined with soft grass, feathers, and wool becomes a swarming hive. Bannertail's farm upbringing had made him all too familiar with feathers and wool. His contribution to the home furnishing had been of the kind that guaranteed a parasitic scourge. This thing he had not learned, for it is instilled by the smell of their mother nest. Cedar bark and sassafras leaves, with their pungent oils, are needed to keep the irritating vermin swarm away. And Silvergray, was she at fault? Only in this, the purifying bark and leaves were scarce. She was weak compared with Bannertail. His contributions had so far outpointed hers that the nest had become unbearable. Their only course was to abandon it. End of chapter 17. Chapter 18 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 18, The New Home. Twice a day now, Silvergray left the little ones to forage for herself soon after sunrise and just before sunset. It was on the morning outing that she went house hunting, and Bannertail went too. Ever he led to the cozy home in his old red oak. But there is a right that is deeply rooted in custom, in logic, and in female instinct, that it is the she-one's privilege to select, prepare, and own the home. Every suggestion that he made by offered lead or actual entry was scorned, and the one who made it snubbed. She did her own selecting. And strangest thing of all, she chose the rude stick nest of a big-winged hawk, abandoned now. For the hawk himself, with his long-clawed mate, was nailed to the end of the barn. Winter storm and beaming sun had purged and purified the rough old eyrie. It was high on a most unclimbable tree, yet sheltered in the wood, and here Silvergray halted in her search. All about the nest and tree she climbed, and smelled to find the little owner marks of musk or rasping teeth, if such there should be, the marks that would have warned her that this place was already possessed. But none there were. The place was without taint, bore only through and through the clean, sweet odor of the woods and wood. And this is how she took possession. She rubbed her body on the rim of the nest. She nibbled off projecting twiglets. She climbed round and round the trunk below and above, thus leaving her foot and body scent everywhere about, then gathered a great mouthful of springtime twigs, with their soft green leaves, and laid them in the hawk nest for the floor cloth of her own. She went farther and found a sassafras, with its glorious flaming smell of incense, its redolence of aromatic purity, and with a little surge of joy instinctive, she gathered bundle after bundle of the sweet, strong twigs, spread them out for the rug and matting of the house. And Bannertail did the same, and for a while they worked in harmony. Then was struck a harsh, discordant note. Crossing the forest floor, Bannertail found a rag, a mitten that some winter woodcutter had cast away, and, still obsessed with the nursery garnish of his own farm kitten days, he pounced on this and bore it gleefully to the nest that they were a-building. And Silvergray, what said she as the evil thing was brought? She had no clear ideas, no logic from the other ill-starred home. She could not say, there was hoodoo on it, and this ragged woolen mitt seems hoodoo-like to me. But these were her strange reactions. The smell of that other nest was like this. That smell is linked with every evil memory. I do not want it here. Her instinct, the inherited wisdom of her forebears, endorsed this view, and as she sniffed and sniffed, the smell inspired her with intense hostility, a hostility that in the other nest was somewhat offset by the smell of her loved brood. But this was not. It was wholly strange and hostile. Her neck hair rose. Her tail trembled a little, as, acting under the new and growing impulse of violent dislike, she hurled the offending rag far from the threshold of her nest. Flop, it went to the ground below, and Bannertail, not quite understanding, believed this to be an accident. Down he went as fast as his feet could carry him, seized on the ragged mitten, brought it again to the home building. But the instinct that had been slow arousing was now dominant in Silvergray. With an angry chatter, she hurled the accursed thing afar, and made it clear by snort and act that such things come not there. This was the strenuous founding of the new nest, and these were among the hidden springs of action and of unshaped thoughts that ruled the founding. The nest was finished in 3 days. A rain roof over all of fresh flat leaves, an inner lining of chewed cedar bark, an abundance of aromatic sassafras, 1 or 2 little quarrels over accidental rags that Bannertail still seemed to think worthwhile. But the new nest was finished, pure and sweet with a consecrating, plague-defying aroma of cedar and of sassafras to be its guardian angel. End of chapter 18. Chapter 19 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 19, The Moving of the Young. It was very early in the morning, soon after sunrise, that they took the hazard of moving the young. Silvergray had fed the babies and looked out and about, and had come back and looked again. Then, picking up the nearest by the scruff of its neck, she rose to the doorway. Now a great racket sounded in the woods. Silvergray backed in again and down, dropped the young one, then put her head out. The noise increased, the trampling of heavy feet. She backed till only her nose was out, and watched. Soon there came in view huge red and white creatures with horns. She had often seen them and held them harmless, but why were they moving so fast? There were other noises coming, much smaller indeed. But oh, how much more dangerous were the 2 that followed and drove the herd. A toe-topped boy and a yellow-coated dog. At war with all the world of harmless woodfolk, these 2 would leave a trail of slaughtered bodies in their wake, if only their weapons were as deadly as their wishes. So Silvergray sank back and brooded over the nursery, varying her loving motherings with violent scratching of a hind foot, or sudden pounce to capture with her teeth some shiny, tiny creeping thing among the bedstuff or on the young one's fluffy skins. The sun was up above the trees. The blue jay sang, "To-roodle, to-roodle," which means all clear. And the glad red singing hawk was wheeling in great rhythmic swoops to the sound of his own wild note, "Cue, cue, cue." He wheeled and rejoiced in his song and his flight. "All's clear, all's well," sang crow and blue jay, these watchful ones, watchful perforce because their ways of rappin' have filled the world with enemies. And Silvergray prepared a second time for the perilous trip. She took the nearest of her babies, gently but firmly, and scrambling to the door, paused to look and listen, then took the final plunge, went scurrying and scrambling down the trunk. On the ground she paused again, looked forward and back, then to the old nest to see her mate go in and come out again with a young one in his mouth, as though he knew exactly what was doing and how his help was needed. With an angry "Quirr!" she turned and scrambled up again, bumping the baby she bore with many a needless jolt, and met Bannertail. Nothing less than rage was in her voice. "Quirr, quirr, quirr!" and she sprang at him. He could not fail to understand. He dropped the baby on a broad, safe crotch, and whisked away to turn and gaze with immeasurable surprise. "Isn't that what you wanted, you hothead?" he seemed to say. "Didn't we plan to move the kids?" Her only answer was a hissing, "Quirr!" She rushed to the stranded little one, made 1 or 2 vain efforts to carry it. as well as the one already in her mouth, then bounded back to the old home with her own charge, dropped it, came rushing back for the second, took that home too, then vented all her wrath and warnings in a loud, long "Quah!" which plainly meant, "You let the kids alone. I don't need your help. I wouldn't trust you. This is a mother's job." She stayed and brooded over them a long time before making the third attempt, and this time the impulse came from the tickling crawlers in the bed. She looked forth, saw Bannertail sitting up high, utterly bewildered. She gave a great warning, "Quah!" seized number 1 for the third time, and forth she leaped to make the great migration. The wood was silent except for its own contented life, and she got halfway to the new nest, when high on a broad, safe perch she paused and set her burden down. Was it the maddening tickling of a crawler that gave the hint, or was it actual wisdom in the lobes behind those liquid eyes? Who knows? Only this is sure. She looked that baby over from end to end. She hunted out and seized in her teeth and ground to shreds 10 of the plaguing crawlers. She combed herself, she scratched and searched her coat from head to tail, and on her neck, where she could not see, she combed and combed, till of this she was certain, no insects of the tickling, teasing kind were going with her to the new home. Then seizing her baby by the neck scruff, up she bounded, and in 10 heartbeats he was lying in their new and fragrant bed. For a little while she cuddled him there, to bait him to it, as the woodsmen say. Then with a parting licking of his head, she quit the nest and hied away for the rest of the brood. Bannertail had taken the hint. He was still up high watching, but not going near the old nest. Silvergray took number 2 and did the very same with him, deloused him thoroughly on the same old perch, then left him with the first. The third went through the same, and Silvergray was curled up with the 3 in the new high nest for long, before Bannertail, after much patient, watchful waiting, seeing no return of Silvergray, went swinging to the old nest to peep in, and realized that it was empty, cold, abandoned. He sat and thought it over. On a high sunny perch that he had often used, he made his toilet, as does every healthy squirrel, thoroughly combed his coat, and captured all, that is, 1 or 2 of the crawlers that had come from the old nest. He drank of the spring, went foraging for a while, then swung to the new-made nest, and shyly, cautiously, dreading a rebuff, went slowly in. Yes, there they were. But would she take him in? He uttered the low, soft coaxing, which expresses every gentleness in the range of squirrel thought and feeling. No answer. He made no move, but again gave a coaxing, A long pause, then from the hovering furry form in the nest came one soft and Bannertail, without reserve, glided in and curled about them all. End of chapter 19. Chapter 20 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel, by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 20, The Coming Out Party. April, the green grass moon, was nearly gone. The graycoats in their new high home were flourishing and growing. Happy in Ed now, it was an event like a young girl's coming out, when first these squirrelets came forth from the nest on their own, and crawling on their trembling legs with watchful mother nigh. They one by one scrambled onto the roof of the home, and, with a general air of, "Aren't we big? Aren't we wonderful?" they stretched and basked in the bright, warm morning sun. A hawk came wheeling high over the treetops. He was not hunting, for he wheeled and whistled as he wheeled. Silvergray knew him well and marked his ample wings. She had seen a red-tail raid. This might not be of the banded kind, but a hawk is a hawk. She gave a low warning, "Chick, chick," to the family, to which they paid not a whit of attention. So she seized each in turn by the handy neck scruff and bundled him indoors to safety. 3 times this took place on different days. 3 times the mother's vigorous lug home was needed, and by now the lesson was learned. Chick chick meant look out, danger, get home. They were growing fast now. Their coats were sleek and gray. Their tails were as yet poor skimps of things, but their paws were strong, and their claws were sharp as need be. They could scramble all about the old hawk nest and up and down the rugged bark of the near trunk. Their different dispositions began to show, as well as their different gifts and makeup. End of chapter 20. Chapter 21 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 21, Nursery Days of the Young Ones. Squirrels do not name their babies as we do. They do not think of them by names, and yet each one is itself, has individual looks or ways that stand for that one in the mother's mind, so is in some sort its name. Thus the biggest one had a very brown head and a very gray coat. He was stronger than the others, could leap just a little farther, and was not so ready to bite when playing with the rest. The second brother was not so big as Brownhead, and he had an impatient way of rebelling at any little thing that did not please him. He would explode into a shrill "Cray!" which was a well-known squirrel exclamation, only he made it very thin and angry. Even to father and mother he would shriek "Cray!" if they did in the least a thing that was not to his wish. The third and smallest was a little girl squirrel, very shy and gentle. She loved to be petted, and would commonly snuggle up to mother, whining softly, "Nyek, nyek," even when her brothers were playing, as well as at feeding time. So in this sort they named themselves Brownhead, Cray, and Nyek, nyek. The first lesson in all young wildlife is this: do as you are told. The penalty of disobedience is death, not always immediate, not clearly consequent, but soon or late it comes. This indeed is the law, driven home and clinched by ages of experience. Obey or die. If the family is outstretched in the sun, and keen-eyed mother sees a hawk, she says, "Chick, chick," and the wise little ones come home. They obey and live. The rebellious one stays out, and the hawk picks him up, a pleasant meal. If the family is scrambling about the tree trunk and one attempts to climb a long, smooth stretch from which the bark has fallen, mother cries, "Chick, chick," warning that he is going into danger. The obedient one comes back and lives. The unruly one goes on. There is no claw hold on such trunks. He falls far to the ground and pays the price. If one is being carried from a place of danger and hangs limp and submissive from his mother's mouth, he is quickly landed in a place of safety. But one that struggles and rebels may be cut by mother's tightening teeth, or dropped by her and seized on by some enemy at hand. There are always enemies alert for such a chance. Or if he swings to drink at the familiar spring and sees not what mother sees, a black snake lurking on a log, or heeds not her sharp "keep back," he goes and maybe takes a single sip, but it is his last. If one, misled by their bright color, persists in eating fruit of the deadly nightshade, ignoring mother's warning, "Quare, quare," he eats, he has willed to eat, and there is a little squirrel body tumbled from the nest next day to claim the kindly care of growing plants and drifting leaves that will hide it from the view. Yes, this is the law, older than the day when the sun gave birth to our earth, that it might go its own way, yet still be held in law. Obey and live, rebel and die. End of chapter 21. Chapter 22 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 22, Cray Hunts for Trouble. Boisterous, strong, and merry was Brownhead, the very son of his father, eager to do and ready to go, yet quick to hear when the warning came, "Quare," or the home call, "Chick, chick." Well-fleshed was he, and deeply fur-clad, although it was scarcely mid-May, and his tail already was past the switch stage, and was frilling out with the silver frill of his best kin. Frolicsome, merry, and shy, very shy, was Nyek Nyek. In some speech, she would have been styled a mammy pet. Happy with mother, playing with her brothers, but ever ready to go to mother. Slight of body, but quick to move, quick to follow, and nervously quick to obey, she grew and learned the learning of her folk. Last was Cray, quickest of them all, not so heavy as Brownhead, yet agile, inquisitive, full of energy, but a rebel all the time. He would climb that long, smooth column above the nest. His mother's warning held him not, and when the claw hold failed, he slipped, but jumped and landed safe on a near limb. He would go forth to investigate the loud trampling in the woods, and far below him watched with eager curiosity the big two-legged thing that soon discovered him. Then there was a loud crack, like a heavy limb broken by the wind, and the bark beside his head was splintered by a blow that almost stunned him with its shock, although it did not touch him. He barely escaped into the nest. Yes, he still escaped. End of chapter 22. Chapter 23 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 23, The Little Squirrels Go to School. These are among the lessons that a mother squirrel, by example, teaches, and that in case of failure are emphasized by many little reproofs of voice or even blows. Clean your coat and extra clean your tail. Fluff it out. Try its trig suppleness. Wave it, plume it, comb it, clean it, but ever remember it, for it is your beauty and your life. When there is danger on the ground, such as the trampling of heavy feet, do not go to spy it out, but hide. If near a hole, pop in. If on a big high limb, lie flat and still as death. Do not go to it, let it come to you if it will. In the air, if there is danger near, as from hawks, do not stop until you have at least got into a dense thicket, or better still, a hole. If you find a nut when you are not hungry, bury it for future use. Nevertheless, this lesson counted for but little now, as all last year's nuts were gone, and this year's far ahead. If you must travel on the ground, stop every little while at some high place to look around, and fail not then each time to fluff and jerk your tail. When in the distant limbs you see something that may be friend or foe, keep out of sight, but flirt your white tail tip in his view. If it be a gray coat, it will answer with the same, the wig-wag, "I am a squirrel too." Learn and practice also the far jumps from tree to tree. You'll surely need them some day. They are the only certain answer to the red-eyed fury that lives on mice, but that can kill squirrels too if he catches them. That climbs and jumps, but cannot jump so far as the gray coats, and dare not fall from high, for he has no plumy tail, nothing but a useless little tag. Drink twice a day from the running stream, never from the big pond in which the grinning pike and mighty snapper lie in wait. Go not in the heat of the day, for then the black snake is lurking near, and quicker is he even than a squirrel on the ground. Go not at dusk, for then the fox and the mink are astir. Go not by night, for then is the owl on the warpath, silent as a shadow. He is far more to be feared than the swish-winged hawk. Drink then at sunrise and before sunset, and ever from a solid log or stone which affords good footing for a needed sudden jump. And remember ever that safety is in the treetops, in this and in lying low. These were the lessons they slowly learned, not at any stated time or place, but each when the present doings gave it point. Brownhead was quick and learned almost overfast, and his tale responding to his daily care was worthy of a grown-up. Lithe, graceful Neck-Neck, too, was growing woodwise. Cray was quick for a time. He would learn well at a new lesson, then, devising some method of his own, would go ahead and break the rules. His mother's warning, "Quair," held him back not at all, and his father's onslaught with a nip of powerful teeth only stirred him to rebellious fight. End of chapter 23. Chapter 24 of Bannertail, The Story of a Gray Squirrel, by Ernest Thompson Seton. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 24, The Lopping of the Wayward Branch. Curiosity may be the trail to knowledge, but it skirts a dangerous cliff. The rose moon, June, was on the hills. Its thrill joy set the whole wood world joy-thrilling. The Bannertail family had frolicked in a game of tag and catch all around the old hawk nest, and up the long smooth pole went Cray to show that he could do it. His mother warned him, "Quair!" But up he went, and down he came without a hint of failure. Then they scattered, scampering for a game of hide-and-seek, when the heavy sound of some big brute a-coming was wind-borne to them. The mother gave the warning, "Chick." 3 of them quickly got to the safe old nest. Silvergray flattened on the upside of a rugged limb. Cray, seeing nothing near and scoffing at their flurry, made for a big crotch into which he could sink from sight if need be, and waited. In vain his mother cried, "Chick!" Cray wouldn't chick. He wanted to know what it was all about. The heavy trampling sound came near. Silvergray peeped over and could see very well. It was the 2-legged brute with the yellow, yapping forelegs that she more than once had met before. They rambled slashingly around, the yap cur eagerly wagging his hideous tail. He swung his black snout in the air, gave out a long yap, another and another. Then the 2 legs came slowly nearer, staring up into the roof trees and moving awkwardly sidewise round and round the tree. Cray peered out farther to watch him. In vain the wise little mother squirrel whispered, "Chick, chick." No, he would not chick. As the ground brute circled the tree, Cray, trying to keep him in sight, quit all attempt at hiding. The yellow forelegs yapped excitedly. Then the big ground brute held very still. Cray was amused at this. He felt so safe that he called out a derisive "Quah!" There was a loud sound like thunder, a flash of lightning, and Cray fell headlong, splashing the gold-green leaves with his bright, hot young blood. His mother saw him go with a clutching of her mother heart, and Mother Carey saw him go and said, "It had to be. For this is the fulfilling of the law. This is the upbuilding of the race. This is the lopping of the wayward branch." The big ground beast below seized on the quivering, warm young body and yelled aloud, "Billy, Billy, I got him, a great big silvergray! Yahoo!" But the meaning of that was unknown to the little mother and the rest. They only knew that a huge, savage brute had killed their little brother and was filling the woods with its hideous, blood-curdling roars.